last year at the MLM Board of Regents meeting, she's very understanding of this area and incredibly supportive of it. And it is a pleasure to introduce her. She is going to talk to us this morning about emerging research trends in biomedical informatics. Please welcome our first speaker.
Thank you. All right, let's find my slides. Good.
You knew we were USC. That's nice.
That's all right. No, I didn't. David let me.
Oh.
I had a name for you before. I don't use those.
Okay.
I'm going to stay tethered to this so I don't have to wear that. I'll try and stand in one place. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm actually looking forward to hearing what you have to say a lot more than what I have to say. But I'm going to say a few things anyway because Randall asked me to. I could say I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. That's a government joke, right? You might not get it. But I want to start out with ground truth, which is really the same as the statement about what this meeting is for, right? These are principles that we accept and know and love at the National Library of Medicine. And the other thing I want to say is, I think I have the best job in the world. I have the opportunity to support excellent science and be the cheerleader for it. I don't know how it could be better. So that's what I'm here to talk about, right? I'm here to support you, not tell you what to do, because that's how we run our grant programs. So you know this. Randall's already talked about it. There's abundant digital data captured during the delivery of clinical care, and everybody wants to use it somehow now. I mean, there are a zillion people now who want to have access to it for their own purposes. Could revolutionize healthcare. They want to make new discoveries, improve for patients themselves, improve their own personal decisions. We've known for years that information technology had the capacity to help us, but the capacity of the infrastructure wasn't always there. It's in much better shape than it used to be, of course. And we know that consensus is needed on a bunch of value trade-offs. We can see that coming, too. For example, the control of your personal health information versus societal benefit, like in whether you want your information in these giant data pools that will be used for virtual clinical trials. It's a big picture when we start thinking about the ways we want to use information. Here's what I'm not going to cover. I'm not from the Office of the National Coordinator, and I'm not going to talk about meaningful use at all. I'm going to talk about other things. And if you want to know more about those definitions of meaningful use, about the certification for electronic health records, of course, all of that is available through the Office of the National Coordinator. The take-home points for my few minutes here are the good news. I think you're not starting from scratch. People have been working on these problems for quite a long time, and some of you have been working on them for quite a long time, and that's a plus. And there are resources to help. I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. I don't know if it's bad news. There's more data coming. You've been talking very focused about what happens in your world, but there's a whole bunch more in terms of different kind of approaches to doing biomedical research, feeds that people think are important from environmental hazards and areas like that. Not to mention empowered consumers and patients. As long as I've been involved with health sciences libraries, I've been hearing physicians who weren't sure how they felt about people coming in with long Medline searches and saying, I want you to explain all this stuff to me. So we've had empowered consumers for a while, but this is way different. Right? It's a very different world now. And then I'm going to close with some ideas about looking ahead, just different ways to think about things. So back in 2002, my colleague Dan Mazies and I while I was at the Association for American Medical Colleges, we were doing a futures study to help medical schools think about how information technology might help improve health in the future. And so in our report, which was funded by the National Library of Medicine, so it's kind of cosmic that I ended up there getting to do something about it, I think, that, the technical infrastructure was largely in place to support anytime, anywhere access to information. So we weren't really worried about that. What we said was the problem that we saw lying ahead was this information space that was fed by where decisions are being made is fed by thousands of different sources already. Back in 2002, it was already information glut. And decision makers, whether you're a physician or a patient or a researcher, get many different kinds of information at the same time, which is not something we used to have to deal with cognitively. So we were imagining the good old days, and we thought this was sort of an evolutionary thing. We used to know pretty much the difference between data, information, and knowledge, and we could recognize them by the boxes they were in, right? That all went away. At least there were still some boxes, but there were a whole lot more boxes, right? Different approaches, different ways to get the information. You had to figure out which source to use. We knew it was going to head this direction more, right? That really the labels and all the ways that we recognized it might disappear, and it would come in a jumble, and then somebody is going to need to help us pull out the parts that are relevant. So what we could see was the problem, we characterized the problem as how best to draw from that cloud of information the right stuff, right? This is the mantra that's been in information as long as it's been around. The right stuff presented in the most effective way for the problem and the person at the time. And we called that binding knowledge to effective action, which is not any different from what you're talking about, right? We want knowledge, the knowledge that we have, to support the decisions, help us make better decisions and move things forward. And so some of the things we thought were needed were real-time online access to information in one context that was created in another. Well, we're experiencing that now when we see streams of research data coming into electronic health records or the human genome, an individual genome. You know we need commonality of syntax and semantics. Those are ugly words to some people, and to information scientists and computer scientists, they aren't ugly words. They're just words that we need. And in order to make things actionable, we simply have to have that. And that is an ongoing challenge. We know we need permeable boundaries, not only between information formats, between the paper and making it easy to move things back and forth, but between organizations who see one another as competitors, but still have to, we say from a societal point of view, have to think about ways that they can share information to help the greater good. And so those intelligence embedded in the system is one of the ways that we can get to that. And I think tools for the quick transformation, for moving things from one form to another or from one type of data to another. And biomedical information specialists. You, Randall, commented on training. You know, the National Library of Medicine's been training physicians to think about computers and medicine since 1972. So believe it or not, we've actually been working. We've been giving grants in this area. We've been training people in this area for many years because it is so important. Whether it's physician informaticians, whether it's, what would you call them, high-powered biomedical librarians, whether it's some other kind of information specialty, sometimes we need that skill in the room and not just somewhere available just in case. So you know this. Since that report that Dan and I did back in 2002, the national initiative to install electronic health records everywhere has been going on. We don't have it finished yet, but it's been talked about for umpteen years now. There are personal genomes. These are all things that we weren't even seeing yet when we were talking. Regional health data warehouses, ubiquitous input and output devices, everything from a chip. I wish I could have a chip that I could embed and just carry stuff around with me, but I know they're out there. And the use of phones as an information exchange and mining tool, smartphones, public debate about who owns the public, my health information. Is it mine or does it belong to your hospital? I mean, these are all things that are still in the wind. But there is also support, more support for the science that leads to solutions. So now I'm going to talk some about the resources. Now I come from NIH, so I'm not going to talk about NSF or ARPA or the private organizations where you could get money. But of course, all of those organizations in various ways have interests. Nevertheless, as you know, NIH invests about $31 billion of your tax money every year in medical research. And many of you probably think of it more as the biological side of research, because lots of NIH was focused on that for a long time. But it is bigger than that. We give out about 50,000 competitive grants to extramural organizations, meaning outside our walls. We throw the money out over the wall, and then about 10% of that budget actually is spent by intramural scientists at NIH who work at NIH and do research. And this is the budget this picture is just to show you how NIH spends. I took it from the NIH website. You could see it too, just to let you know. The big blue side here, those are the standard research grant, R01, for those of you who are in the research grant business. So about half of this money, a little more than half of this money that goes extramurally goes into those research grants, and about another 10% into research centers of various kinds. So we do have, new to us, fairly new, right? We have Dr. Francis Collins, who is a guy who understands the role of informatics. That's one important thing. So did Dr. Zerhouni, the previous director, and also is committed to translational work in the sense that all of the things like the human genome, right? The whole point that was made in that investment argument was that it was going to help improve human health. So he's still committed to that. So you can see that in his list, when he came to NIH, his list of priority areas, the high throughput technologies, translational medicine, benefiting healthcare reform, global health, and reinvigorating biomedical research community are all potentially related to what we're here talking for. So that's the positive way I see it, right? Instead of us, for many years, NLM was like this. We called ourselves the NSF of NIH, right? Like nobody else wanted to talk about informatics or computational science, but we always did. Now a lot of people do, and I'm going to show you a little of that. Many of you have probably heard that this is going on right now. Dr. Collins wants to start up a new institute. That is, of course, we're government. We always turn it into an acronym. NCATS is what this is called, but it's really about translational science and trying to get to therapeutics more quickly than we do right now. This, as you may know, if you follow the trends of what's going on at NIH, the Clinical Translational Science Awards Network that's been developed by NCRR would be a part of this. So Dr. Collins envisions our having a national clinical trials network available now to really move stuff forward. And he's also said he wants to see clinical trials methodologies change, right? That maybe it's time to look at ways to make it more efficient and less costly, faster. He's also mentioned a couple of areas. These could end up delivering more kinds of data to the pool that we're talking about. Global health is important. And in a sense, both of these are related to public health informatics, which, the whole public health prediction of outbreaks and biosurveillance side, this already, also wants information from the electronic health record and from care in order to do predictions. So those are feeds that I think we'll see more of. Here's I'm a former anthropologist, so when NIH said, hey, we like basic behavior and social science too, I was kind of happy because up until then there wasn't ever any money going from NIH into these areas. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because of what they are calling survey biology, which is a mixture of research that involves the collection of both qualitative and quantitative data that come bundled together in the research results. So even when we're talking about research results that could be available in the electronic health record, they aren't going to be the same as the simple kind of numeric, not simple, the complex numeric data that we've seen in the past. If you want to know any more about this, I think it's a pretty interesting trend. There are now people at NIH who are thinking about the best practices for how to blend methodologies in research so that you can cover this territory more broadly, so that you're gathering biological information as well as demographics and psychological information and making it as a meaningful package. I love this picture. So I just want to pretend it's still like that, right? This picture was I think in Science magazine back at the beginning of the Recovery Act, because this is how we were feeling at NIH, and you guys were probably feeling pretty good about it too. But I'm here to say there are still dollars coming to us, and we are still funding great research. We don't have the Recovery Act anymore, but we still have a budget, and we want to spend it in these important areas. So I use the NIH Reporter. If any of you ever look at that, or if you've ever gone to NIH and said, I wonder what those guys are putting that $30 billion into. We used to have a terrible system that was very hard to use, but the NIH Reporter is really different. So you can go in and say, I'm interested in biomedical informatics, and it will tell you how much money is being spent currently. Like, these are active grants. I just searched the clumsy phrase biomedical informatics. Why not? And found about $1 billion of active funding from NIH in this area. Now, what you see in this pie is who's funding it. Now, if you're someone who's interested in getting grants, it's always useful to think about that, right? Because sometimes you're going to target a grant application, or let's say you're working in an area that has to do with heart disease. You might want to know whether the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute funds much informatics, which indeed it does. You may know the Cancer Institute certainly does. So doing this can help you identify sort of potential homes for the research that you're talking about and the future research you want to do. Here's another example. These are just active awards currently active at NIH. There's about $20 million in clinical decision support. So it isn't only about the National Library of Medicine funding it, a lot of other people are too. Electronic medical records, $46 million. So you can easily do this kind of thing. So this is just part of I sell grants for a living, right? It's like selling cars. I feel like I need to tell you that this is here and these are resources available to you, and you're going to be talking about good ideas, and I want to help you find the way to support them. Now, this is one kind of resource. We're another kind of resource that I just have to mention. The National Library of Medicine, of course, is a library, right? It's the world's largest medical library, and it does all the kinds of things that libraries do. We assist, users. We have famous databases, but we do conduct and support research. We do it extramurally, as you've heard already, and we do it intramurally as well. We have two organizations, which I jokingly call the Twin Towers. We have the National Center for Biotechnology Information. Randall told me not to talk about bioinformatics, and I'm not going to do it. Nevertheless, there's a lot of bioinformatics going on that is supported by the National Center and the research of the rest of us. dbGaP for phenome-genome data. They actually run PubMed and PubMed Central. So when you're people who are doing text analysis or text mining or trying to come up with new ways to develop hypotheses based on published knowledge, these are all resources that we have. And in the Lister Hill Center, we have a bunch of people working in personal health records, on terminologies and de-identification tools. Those are available to you so that you don't have to reinvent those wheels. So I just want to make that statement. Of course, it's the extramural side that I'm interested in because that's where I work. And so when we talk about biomedical informatics research, we are in a really broad way. We're just talking about applying computer and information sciences to almost every place in that communication pathway: access, storage, retrieval, management, dissemination, and use of biomedical information. We support basic and applied research. It's inherently interdisciplinary. And I can tell you, if you're a computer scientist in the room, if you came to us with even a great idea, but you weren't actually trying it out with the people who would be affected by it, our reviewers would say, come back when you've got some patients or doctors or other caregivers to work with. It's very important to us. So here's how we split up. I'm just back to the R01s, the research grants. Here's how the National Library's extramural budget is spent. So we spend about 35% of our extramural research budget on healthcare informatics. By that, I mean just what we're talking about right now. But we also spend about a comparable amount on translational and bioinformatics and trying to link up the biology, the phenome, and the genome, and on public health informatics, thinking about biosurveillance. So we try and cover the whole world. Of course, we need all the money in the world to really cover all the world. Nevertheless, I'm just giving you a sense of this has been pretty standard. We haven't changed other than moving for less bioinformatics and more translational and clinical, because we are still a main funder of clinical informatics at NIH. And I'm not going to, you can go to our website and see. In fact, I would encourage you to, if you're thinking about, well, I wonder if this is a good place for the kind of research I want to do. We keep a list of awards on our website that makes it easy for you to go look at abstracts and publications of the people we've already funded. But these are areas, secondary use of healthcare data, virtual clinical trials and drug safety monitoring, all of these are areas in which we have active research right now. So the other reason I mention this is you might see a topic on our website or here that's one you're interested in and find collaborators, which is always a plus. Integration. So these are all clinically oriented, obviously, but we do fund more generic, not entirely generic, because it's still biomedical information, integration and mining of heterogeneous data types. This is a pretty big, complicated thing. Huge databases and also heterogeneous. But if you want to mine images and text at the same time, we need to have good ways to do that. And I think we need a whole lot more than we have right now of the tools that can do text summarization or either take unstructured text and structure it or vice versa. That's what I mean by information transformation. So now I'm moving to my third, nearly final area. I just can't let us forget that there are more people in the room than there used to be when we're talking about health decisions. I'm working with some colleagues right now on a chapter on the future of biomedical informatics, and the one we saw from 10 years ago didn't even mention patients. It only talked about hospitals and doctors, which of course are important too, but this is part of the decision process. So you know this, and I'm one of these people. I grew up in the Army. I don't even have an electronic health record anywhere. I got pieces of paper. Who knows what I have? And so there are many gaps, many owners. Some people have thrown my records away because they haven't heard from me in, umpteen years. You know that many people use the internet as a source of health information, and lots of times they're using Google first, right? They use Medline Plus, they use other resources. They piece together a picture, and they really use friends and relatives. They use online advice. Blogs, chat rooms, advocacy groups have groups that are very closely bonded. So there are plenty of people who feel savvy about using the internet to get health information, but that isn't really the same as being literate about health information or making good decisions with it. So while in our world of the future, thinking about how to help with this is important too. NLM has people in our intramural in Lister Hill Center working on a personal health record that would just be available to anyone, which would be a tool for families who want to keep track of their own health information. Many people have tried various things. Nevertheless, it's important because of the fact that we have a mobile population and because of the fact that people have different pieces of information all over. And what if there's an emergency and you actually want to have access to something? We have a special area of interest in disaster information management just for this reason. So, of course, we're the NLM. We're going to talk about using standards in a personal health record so that we can do things like custom reminders. We can draw from electronic health records at hospitals and other places and feed information to the people who need it. Now I'm heading toward you're about ready to start hearing a whole lot of great stuff about research that's going on, and I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm saying sometimes I like to think about it as from the big picture side. We're going to talk, you're going to be talking, and you've already seen a lot at a very detailed level because that's where some of the work has to come from. And I think the combination of big picture and grassroots is the right way to do it. So this is one of the things I want, right? I want something that will easily transform and put together information for me that could just turn around and be the person that I want it to be. It could crawl the internet, find all that stuff that's missing about me, and create a consolidated or federated resource. It could alert me to new stuff. This is an agent, but it could be a transforming agent. It could actually be something that could translate difficult technical language that I don't understand into some kind of language I could understand because it would know who I am. These are all things that are technically possible, but they aren't available to me even as an educated consumer, much less as plenty of other people on our planet who haven't had the benefits that I have. This is my personal favorite. I'd just like to have information be smart. Maybe I'm a physician or somebody else. I would just like the information to do some of the work in thinking about. So again, I'm anthropomorphizing the information, but after all, there could be tools embedded that could go out and look for what's new in the area that is what my heart is about, that could make a determination of whether that new information is actually new or refutes what I think already, that could decide when it needs to be updated and also communicate with me about it and say, what do you think, Valerie? This is what I found. This is what it says. This could be my personal health record, but it could be the bigger sphere of information that I'm interested in for my whole family. And I like the idea, that annotating and hand managing huge scientific databases does not scale. We simply have to build more of this in various ways. And this is just another thing that would be nice to think about. There are a whole lot of things, I think, that if we think about clinical trials in the future, there's a lot of stuff that could be done in silico that we don't even do. I don't know why we don't have computational animal models yet. I don't know why we don't have except that it's hard. Right? I know it's hard, but so what? Right? We have plenty of smart people working on it who could be working on it. But even trying to get multi-level models of organ systems is pretty hard, right? It's pretty hard to get it out of people. People like to work, how this, people are trained to work in certain areas, but that part where you say, I'd like a functioning model of a digestive system or something, isn't there. But you could imagine doing a lot of the preparatory work in an in silico kind of platform like this, which could really reduce the cost of clinical trials, so that when you only have to if you have to go and bring living humans into them, you could actually reduce the number that you needed and have a better shot at finding out things more quickly. So that's just my dreaming world of big picture from the other side of things. You're thinking about the information coming in. I'm also thinking about how I'm going to see it. Now, here's the good news, I think. NIH has this thing called a common fund. So for the last couple of years, we've had an extra $30 million or more a year. So we right now we have about $500 million invested in common fund. This is for trans NIH stuff. So it's not only heart-lung, it's not only NLM, it's not only cancer. It needs to be stuff that is broader than any one of the institutes. The idea of the Common Fund, it's like startup money, so the NIH would invest for 5 or 10 years, and then the research could move on to being supported by other institutes. Why am I telling you about this? Because strategic planning is going on right now for this fund. For 2013, they're gathering ideas. So they brought together a bunch of smart people, got this list that I'm showing you of the topics that people said these are really interesting that aren't covered by any one institute now. Some of you in the room may actually have been at this meeting, at this innovation brainstorm. I highlighted in red the one that, of course, I'm thinking about. There are plenty of others here that might appeal to you as well. And if you go to that, on this website for the Common Fund, these are the kinds of things that people mentioned that needed attention. I actually think there could be a whole lot more that needs attention. So what I'm suggesting also, so these are things that came from a bunch of smart people that NIH brought in, because that's how we do this. But the institutes and centers ourselves also get to suggest things. So the library has proposed a topic area on the challenge of big data and biomedical and translational science. I pulled out 2 others that were submitted by other parts of NIH, because I think these are all areas that you might find interesting. And what wants to happen is you go to commonfund.nih.gov, and they're looking for your suggestions. You could say, well, where's all the stuff that relates to meaningful use of complex medical data, and give them some suggestions. Because this will help get more money into the areas that we need, that we're going to be talking about today. So I encourage you to do that. That's a time is now kind of thing. I think in the next few weeks is when they're going to be collecting this. So perfect timing for this, right? You're going to get a bunch of great ideas from here. Time to feed them into these guys, because I'd love to see more money coming into informatics. So that's my closing shot. I say that's where we are now, and this is where you're going to take us. And I'm looking forward to hearing it. Thank you.